In our insecurities, not living with our insecurities, but just waiting in our insecurities. And I think ultimately when you are waiting, that's what comes to the surface anyway. I was thinking about this, and I remembered the day that I was being considered for a job here at First Christian. And I had been going to this church for several years already, and I remember knowing that it was going to come up to a vote, and I wasn't part of the eldership at that time, but knowing that the decision was going to be made if I was going to become the next youth pastor, and I was told, wait. And so the lead up to that elders meeting in the first place, I had some anxiety going on for me because I knew what I wanted to do, and I thought God wanted me there, but I had to wait. And when I waited, I found that all those insecurities started bubbling to the surface. Like, they're not going to hire you, Micheal. You're not good enough, right? You're not going to be good enough. And some of my background, I'm a high school dropout. I had to go back and to go to high school and to go through college. I had to do that because my teen years was something I needed to be redeemed from, right? But it's hard to look past that. Because that's what I always saw myself as. In fact, there are moments in life today where I still see myself as no more than that, right? And not that that's a bad thing. So if that's you, I'm not putting you down at that point. I'm just saying that was something that I didn't think I deserved the position that I was being thought about for. I was being considered. I'm not good enough for that position. And if they really knew my family life and the problems that I have going on there, they wouldn't put me in this position. And I've been doing church work for a really long time. Like, I was getting ready to trim down my beard today, and I noticed all the gray hair, and I thought, wow, you're getting really old. But at that time, when I was being considered for this job, I didn't have any gray hair. And the insecurity that was coming to the surface at that point was, you're too young for this. Like, there's no way they're going to give you this job. And so I was being asked to wait, and as I was waiting, all of my insecurities is what came to the surface. All the reasons I wasn't good enough is what came to the surface. And I think about that, and I think that's ultimately when we're asked to wait, that's tends to be what happens, right? I remember my youngest son being born, and he was 2 months early, and I remember waiting to find out how he was. And the only thing going through my mind is he's not big enough. Like, he's just 2 pounds. He's like, how is a baby going to make it when he's such, he looks like a tree frog? How's that going to work? And I remember thinking, there was one point where the doctor came and told us he had a small bleed in his brain. And they said, it'll probably just go away given time, but we're keeping an eye on it. And I remember thinking, that's not going away. He's going to need brain surgery. It's got to happen. All of my insecurities, the worst possible fears is what comes to the surface when we're asked to wait. And ultimately, I think that's where Ruth is at when we start chapter 4. Because in chapter 3, if you remember, she was told to wait. She had done everything that she could do to make sure that redemption happens. She lays at the feet of Boaz, and Boaz says, no, there's another who is first in line to be able to redeem. And so I have to give him the opportunity first. But if he won't, I will do it. But just go and wait. And so you have Ruth waiting. And I think as Naomi is waiting, all of those insecurities are going to come to the surface. Maybe I didn't say the right things when we were at the threshing floor. Maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I haven't been loyal enough. Maybe he just doesn't like me. And but Naomi tells Ruth something that I think is powerful. She says, he will not rest until what he has said has been accomplished. And so, although I'm wondering if Ruth went through those insecurities, she had a foundation of somebody who wouldn't let her down. Somebody who's proven himself faithful throughout all of the book of Ruth. Boaz has proven himself to be a noble character, a man of standing. And so she's waiting, but the person she's waiting on is somebody that can be depended on, somebody who she knows is going to put her best interests and promote that. And so it's just amazing as we approach chapter 4 of Ruth, what it would be like for Ruth. And by the way, that's where we're at. We're in Ruth chapter 4. So if you have your Bible, I encourage you to open it up and look right there in Ruth chapter 4. Because Boaz is a man of his word, and he doesn't rest until the matter is accomplished. And that's what's going to happen. So if you're looking at Ruth chapter 4, we're going to start in verse 1, and we're just going to read all the way to verse 12. Follow along with me. Here's what it says. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and he sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders into the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders and of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line." "I will redeem it," he said. Then Boaz said, "On the day that you buy the land from Naomi, you acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the guardian redeemer said, "Then I can't redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and the transfer of property, it become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are my witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilon, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabite, Mahlon's wife, as my wife, or Mahlon's widow as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with the property, so that his name will not disappear from among the family or from the hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. Through your offspring, the Lord gives you by this young woman. May your family be like that of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah." And as we read this, I want you to recognize that the story that we went through last week, where Ruth goes to the threshing floor and asks Boaz to redeem her family, what was done at night at a threshing floor is now brought into the daylight at the city gate. See, Boaz wanted to do the right thing, but he wanted to do it in the right way. And it wouldn't be right to do it in secret. It wouldn't be right to do it at night. He needed to bring this to the city gate in front of all the elders. It was important for him to do the right thing, but to do it in the right way. Not to mention that he is interested about what God wants. He's also interested in how he's perceived by the elders at his town gate. Right? And I think that's powerful when we think of Boaz, because he is a man of character, he is a man of standing, but he is that because he always does things in a way that describes the daylight instead of the night. Right? Like he's not going to redeem her at night, he's going to do it right there at the city gate during the daylight where everyone can see, because Boaz is a man of character. And his character is one that's going to make redemption possible. And that's going to be my first point, is that redemption is an act of sacrifice and love. If you're taking notes, that's something you can write down. Redemption is an act of sacrifice and love. It's a beautiful story, but look at verse 1, if you will. It says, Boaz went to the town gate and sat down there, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Now, if you're wondering, why would he go to the town gate? Right? We were reminded that during that time you only had one gate, right, to get into a city. People would come in through that one gate and out through that one gate. So it was the social center of Bethlehem, Kind of like our cell phones are for us today, right? If I want to get a hold of somebody, I'm going to call them up or text them. If I want to find out what's going on in somebody's life, I'm going to jump onto Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and see what they're up to, right? Because that's the place that we post all of our social things. That's where we put the pictures of our dogs and our grandkids, and we put prayer requests, we discuss social issues, and we even sell things on Facebook. I've sold multiple things on Facebook now, right? The cell phone has become the city gate, right? Because it was at the city gate that Boaz goes to, that everything that comes in and out of the town needed to pass through that gate. That's where the elders would sit during the day so that they could oversee what's going in and out of the town. That's where you're sure to meet somebody, because at this time you can't just call them up on the phone. You have to where are they most likely to be? Well, that city gate served as a funnel. Everybody had to pass through it. So if I want to meet somebody, I need to go sit there and wait for them, right? And that's what Boaz does. He knows the right place to go, because this is where things happen. This is where the elders would be. This is where the man would have to pass through. But guess what? Just as he goes to the town gate, he sits down. The text says, just then, the man that he had referred to showed up. I'm into coincidences, but have you noticed how often they show up in the book of Ruth? Ruth in chapter 2 says, I want to go and glean, and maybe I'll find a field of someone whom I find favor. And it says, by happen chance, she showed up at the field of Boaz, the second person in line who's able to redeem the family, right? And here, Boaz doesn't rest. He gets right to it, and he goes to the town gate, but he doesn't even have to wait long. As soon as he sits down, there the guy is. It just amazes me when we see how God is working through the story of Ruth, right? God is sovereign, making sure that things happen according to his will and his plan to cause all things to work for good for those who have called him and been called according to his purposes, right? That's God when we see him working in the story. And he does it again, and it's just so amazing that just as Boaz sits down, well, that's when the guy shows up. And I think those things happen a lot in our life, and I've pointed that out as we've gone through this study. But every time I see it, I want to thank God for it, right? Because some people, when those things happen in their life, they call it luck. Well, if that's the case, I think a lot of us are the luckiest people alive, right? Because all of a sudden, God shows up and does things that we weren't expecting, and he uses responsible people to do it. Right? And so not only should it be something that we're open to, God might do something in my life, but it's something that we should be considering how I might be a blessing to other people. Because we don't know when God might be saying, I want to use you to be a blessing for this person. And God's putting all the things together so that you can do that. God's working sovereignly for his will. And when we see that, we should thank him for it. And we see it here again in the book of Ruth. Just as Boaz shows up to the one place he knows the guy's going to be, and he sits down, that's when the guy shows up, just then. It all works out. And so what does Boaz do? He grabs 10 elders from the town and says, sit right here. And this falls in line too, because the Bible tells us that every matter should be witnessed, but done in the company of at least 2 to 3 witnesses. Well, Boaz isn't leaving this one up to chance. 2 to 3, no, I'll take 10, right? He's got to get them all over there, because he wants to make sure that when he does the right thing, nobody's going to be able to say that he did it in the wrong way, right? And by the way, that makes this a little bit more difficult for Boaz. I'm wondering if he could have just done a lot of it in secret. Maybe, cut some corners. But Boaz doesn't do that. He does the right thing in the right way, in a way that everybody will look at him and say, that is a man of character. He cares about how people perceive him. And so he tells the town elders, you sit right here, right? And they're going to witness the exchange between Boaz and this man who he calls friend. By the way, the Greek word for friend could also mean so-and-so. I thought that was fascinating when I read it. It's and here comes so-and-so, right? The NIV says a friend. Other text says so-and-so, right? Imagine if that was your attribute to the Bible. What did you contribute? Oh, you were that so-and-so guy, right? Well, the NIV will make it nice. They'll call you the friend. But just at this point, that's when so-and-so walks up, right? And Boaz says, sit down over here. And then he takes the elders and says, you guys sit down over here. And listen to what verse 3 says. It says, then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Mahlon, is selling a piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of all these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so that I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he said. Now, if you've been following along, this is not the ending we expected, right? So it's a good thing we have some more to read. But nobody expected that this guy's going to say, sure, I'll redeem it, right? Because all throughout this, we've been hoping, and God's been kind of pointing his finger that Boaz is the guy. And now this guy sets up and says, I'm going to do it. Like, I'll take care of it. And I don't know, when I first read that, I was thinking, this is what's going on here, right? It seemed to me that Boaz wanted to be the redeemer. Now he's suggesting that this other guy does it, right? Was he not being truthful with Ruth as they said at the threshing floor? It seems to me like he's trying to push him to do this, right? He wanted this man to act responsibly, to fulfill his obligation, right? But if he wasn't going to fulfill his obligation, he put it out there that he wants to, right? So he's giving the man the opportunity to do what's right, but he's saying, hey, if you're not going to do it, I'll take care of it. Now, this idea goes to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 25. And we've read this a couple times as we've gone through this text, but it reminds us of the purpose of the kinsman redeemer. In verse 25, it says, if one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. So I want you to see that this isn't just like something they should do, it's an obligation. Right? This man, we'll call him so-and-so, maybe he's a friend. This man had an obligation, a responsibility, something he was supposed to do. And Boaz is giving him the opportunity to fulfill his obligation, right? To do the right thing. And it wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't something that God intended for people to go, maybe I will, maybe I won't. In fact, I think if this man would have been a man of standing, now I'm kind of just assuming as I read this, but I think if this man would have been a noble character, he would have already fulfilled his duty. But he hadn't done it yet. And so Boaz has to kind of corner him at the town gate in front of all the elders and say, what are you going to do here? Right? The man has no wiggle room. He's got to decide what he's going to do. Now, he says he's going to do it, and I think he says he's going to do it because this was an easy thing for him to do. In order to redeem property, you had to take money from your own estate to buy the property, but you're still acquiring more assets, so you're actually growing your estate, right? So for him, this seems like a really sweet deal because Naomi has already mentioned that she's beyond the age of having any children. So as far as he sees, there's going to be no other kids. That means that once he buys this property, after Naomi has passed away and there's no hope in any offspring in the future, all the property he just bought is going to be absorbed into his own estate. And he's going to grow more rich. And so, of course, he says, I will do it. And think about that. How easy is it for us to do the right thing when it doesn't cost us anything? Right? Like that's an easy one. Stand up and say, yep, that's me. I'm going to do it. Right? We like to be that one. Do the right thing when it doesn't cost us anything. But when doing the right thing requires a sacrifice, that's not quite as easy. And I find that a lot of times doing the right thing actually requires some kind of sacrifice. That's why my point is that our redemption is an act of sacrifice and love. See, this man is willing to redeem because he's going to end up benefiting from that act. Well, I think Boaz anticipated that because I think Boaz is a pretty shrewd guy. And so he presents it in a way that makes this seem like a really good deal. And then he throws a wrench into the situation, right? He throws a wrench into it. He adds something that maybe the so-and-so didn't know. And in the next verse, verse 5, it says, Then Boaz said, On the day that you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, Then I can't do it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it. I cannot do it. I don't know if he could have said the words, I cannot do it, more times than like that little paragraph. Like, once he finds out that this act of redemption is going to cost him something, he says, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like, it's going to cost me something. It's going to be hard. It's going to take sacrifice. And here's the reason. In Deuteronomy chapter 25, there's another law of redemption. And it's in verse 5, and this is what's supposed to happen. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry the name of the dead brother, so his name will not be blotted out from Israel. So it was the brother's job, the closest relative's job, to marry the widow so that his firstborn child would carry on the name of his dead brother, right? This is another act of redemption. And this one is really beautiful because it's taking somebody who was once dead and bringing his family line back to life. See, that's where Naomi is. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. They're gone. She has no chance of having any more kids. And so at first this seems like a great deal because, once Naomi's gone, I get all that property. But now with Boaz's little wrench he throws in there, all of a sudden he realizes this is going to cost me something. I'm going to have to marry Ruth. And now it might hurt my estate. When I first read this, I remember I was a lot younger, right? And I thought, why didn't he want to marry Ruth? She seems like a stand-up girl, right? Like she's loyal, she does the right thing. She's the kind of girl that you would pick. Why doesn't he want to marry her? And I thought, well, maybe he just started maybe, one wife is enough. And so, would you need any more, right? And I don't know, maybe you guys are all like, yeah, one wife is more than enough, right? Terry's eventually going to get married back there, right? And that's in the mix. And for some reason, he thinks, one wife. But this man thinks one wife is enough. But that's not what's going on here. What he's realizing is if he takes money out of his own estate and buys the property back, redeems it, he's going to eventually have to give that property over to the child of Ruth. And so now he's dividing his estate. And what he may have had set aside for his own family is now going to be split into 2. And so his own family may not get as much as he wanted them to have. And so all of a sudden he realizes that redeeming her is going to take an act of sacrifice. I don't want to sacrifice from my own estate to take care of someone else. Like, you do it, you do it. I don't want to. The man couldn't redeem her because he was self-interested. He was focused on how it would affect his own estate. Boaz is willing to sacrifice because he wants to redeem. It's going to hurt his estate too. It's going to have an impact on his own income. But sometimes doing the right thing comes at a cost, right? And he loves her. And so here's what Boaz does. He stands up, and I love the way that they do this. Like the author of Ruth has to put a little side note there, this is how business transactions are taken care of. During that time, if you take off your sandal and you just hand it to somebody, that'll do the deal, right? Now, if you've ever bought something, I just bought my car last year and I was signing just the highlighted parts, and it was page after page of just highlighted parts. And the guy was like, well, I told you this and I told you that. This is to remind you that I didn't know what I was signing, right? But at this time, all they did is just took off their shoe and was like, here, deal done, right? Wouldn't life be that so much easier if it was just that? Here's my shoe, deal done. That's how it is. But the writer of Ruth kind of puts that little disclaimer, this is what's going on here. This is how things happen. And most people believe that the reason the shoe was accompanied with the sale of property is because it was your way of giving them something that said, now you have the right to stand on this land, to come and go as you please. It's yours to stand on. And so here's what happens. After the writer explains that, Verse 8 says, so the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed the sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chelon, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabite, widow's wife, the Mahlon's widow, as a wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with the property, so that the name will not disappear from among the family or from the hometown. Today you're my witnesses. Isn't it great that Boaz didn't make this deal at night on the threshing floor, but did it in the daylight where there was all these witnesses? See, that's the kind of people that we should be. We should be people who live in the light, not in the night, right? We should be people who stand up and say, you're my witnesses to this act, that we're doing the right thing in the right way, that people see us and they glorify our Father for the way that we live. And that is Boaz. He does the right thing, even though it's going to mean a sacrifice for his own estate. See, he's still got to buy the land with his own money, and then he's got to split that land now. He's got to give it over to the son of Ruth. And then the rest of his estate goes to the rest of his family. But Boaz understands this is going to be a sacrifice, but redemption's always a sacrifice. See, if you didn't know that, John chapter 3, verse 16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. Right? That's a sacrifice. Ken quoted it, but 1 John 3:16 says, this is how we know what love is. Christ died for us. Like, that's a sacrifice. If he wasn't, like, if you want to understand what it means to be redeemed, it means that God gave something. He laid down his life. He sent his son, born of a woman, and placed him in a manger in the same town that Boaz is standing in the gate of. Because God was willing to pay the sacrifice needed so that we could have redemption. Redemption is an act of sacrifice. It's an important act of sacrifice that we all needed. We all still need, right? Because we live in these insecurities. And sometimes we need to be told that I've paid for that. I've covered that. You're more than that. And the only way that that could be made possible is by what Jesus did for us. And that's going to move us on to my second point. Redemption is realized in the birth of a son. Right? Now we know that Boaz is the one who can redeem, but when the author switches to talking about the child, he talks about the child as being like the fruit of redemption. It's realized in this child. So verse 13 says this. This is going to go all the way through 16 or 17. It says, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better than 7 sons has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Right? There's this conclusion of this story where everything that has been up to this point is now realized in this son who's been born. Right? The redemption that Naomi was hoping for, because she had lost everything. She had lost her husband and her 2 sons, and she had come back to Bethlehem, and she says she's empty, she's bitter. Now she's got a child to place in her arms. God has redeemed her. He has brought her back into the status she had before she left. That's redemption, to bring back or to buy back. And God has redeemed her. And he's used people of responsibility to accomplish his will. And God continues to do that same thing through us today, to use you in some way to accomplish his will. But I want you to look at because when it says Boaz took Ruth, she became his wife, and when he made love to her, I mean, I don't have to explain what that is for anybody here, but here's what it goes on to say. The Lord enabled her to conceive, right? The Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth. She gave birth to a son. Like, when we read verses like this, it should be like the starkest reminder that God is engaged in every conception. that God is placing. He's knitting us together inside our mother's womb. And every life is a gift from God. That's something that we need to see because it's a powerful point. It's God who enabled her to conceive. Like Boaz did the responsible thing. He married her. He made love to her. But it's God that enabled her to conceive. Like every one of my kids is a gift from God. Even the ones that didn't quite make it to term, right? Those, like every one of my kids I think of as a gift from God. No. Even the ones that didn't make it to term. Like I know that God was in that process, doing something that I don't understand and loving them in a way and had a purpose for them that I don't even know. I just think God is involved in every conception, and he's involved in this one, working sovereignly. But once that baby is born, it seems almost unfair because Naomi is the one that gets most of the credit, right? The same women who in chapter 1 was like, could this possibly be Naomi? She left full and she's coming back empty. It doesn't even look like her. And Naomi says, call me Mara because my life has become bitter. Now those same women that greeted her when she showed up, now those same women are blessing her. Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He renew your life and sustain you. Why is she so blessed? Because this daughter-in-law, Ruth, who we've been reading about from chapter 1, who wouldn't leave her when Orpah did, who gleaned from the fields and worked hard all day and throughout the whole season, who was willing to put herself out there and go to the threshing floor. She has been so loyal to Naomi that now the ladies look and say, she is far better than 7 sons. Like, I have 2 sons. I think they're pretty great. I can't imagine somebody that's better than 7, right? Ruth has been a blessing to Naomi. And I think that's important. At least they see it. But it's Naomi who puts the child in her arms. It's Naomi who cares for the child. If you look at that, that's in verse 16. And I thought, why isn't Ruth the one taking care of this child? Why isn't Ruth the one that they say had a son? But if you look at it, verse 16 says, verse 17 says, Naomi had a son. See, this is redemption that is realized in the birth of a son. This is Naomi being brought back and redeemed to her place of importance that she left with. God had restored her family. He brought her back. I think that's an amazing thing. And it all comes down to bring us to a point where it says, he's the father of Jesse, the father of David. Like we get to this point of David. But I want to point out my last point is the hope in the future. There is hope for redemption in the future. And the reason I say that is because when you read this genealogy, this child becomes somebody great. When you read this genealogy, here's what it says. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Mibadad. Mibadad, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Solomon. Solomon, the father of Boaz. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of David. Like, this is all bringing us to the point where we have King David. And God has been working in the background to get to this point because he promised Abraham, through your offspring, all nations would be blessed. And he promised Judah that you would be the scepter of my people. And he promises David that you'll always have a descendant on the throne. And God is sovereignly working throughout history to make those promises come true. But it all ends in Matthew chapter 1. When this same genealogy comes out. But in chapter 1, verse 16, all of this genealogy is leading us to this one person. It says, then Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, who's called the Messiah. Like all this is coming together to bring us to that one person born in a manger in this same town years later. because God is working sovereignly, and all those people that I can barely pronounce their names, like he's using them to act responsibly to carry out his will, which ends with the Messiah born in a manger. And Jesus didn't come just to be born in a manger. His entire life was a sacrifice made to God. His entire life, he lived to please and glorify his Father. And that ended on a cross. But the reason it ended on a cross is because redemption takes sacrifice. And God so loved the world that he gave his Son, and he went to the cross for us. I want to read Matthew 20, verse 28, because I want us to remember what the point of this whole story is. In verse 28, it says, "Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." We have redemption because of what he did on the cross. Boaz is a beautiful story that illustrates the point, but he's not our Redeemer. Jesus is the one who did not come to serve, but to be served and to give his life as a ransom for many. He's the reason that we could be forgiven. Because in our sin, we're separated from God, and we may hope for more out of life, but our life is always going to be missing something if we're not connected with the Creator. And the only one that can pay that price, the only one who's able to redeem is Jesus. And this is all working out so that we can get to that baby born in a manger. I think what a beautiful story that Boaz illustrates. But we are the people that live in the redemption of Christ. And so just as the women said to Naomi, "Blessed are you," I'm going to say to you, you guys are pretty blessed. We have a Redeemer. Maybe we should start living like it, right? Because we're looking forward to the day where even our bodies are redeemed. But until that point, we need to live as if we have been already.